So this is the scene on Achilles' shield in which, in the description of the city, there's a gathering of a people in an assembly, and there's a quarrel described, and a legal dispute, in which what they're quarreling about is the poinē. This is the word that came up in our discussion of the speech of Ajax in Book 9, in Rhapsody 9, okay? But where the quarrel is about, and this has been a difficult thing to establish in the scholarly tradition about it, what's the quarrel about? And the quarrel is about whether the person who's offered the compensation for the death of a relative has to accept it or not. And you have one person saying, I've offered the compensation, and the other refusing to accept anything. And the word that he uses for anything is a word this is the only place in the whole of the Iliad. It's just a word for nothing, but it's a word that's taboo, except in this place in the Iliad. So he really means it.
Yeah,
He's not going to accept anything.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that in this situation, you're bringing up the analogy you hear again between what Achilles does in the ninth Rhapsody of the Iliad and how he refused the compensation and the offer that was made to him. And so there's a little Achilles vignette in the middle of his own
That's
shield.
right.
Yeah.
And so you want to say anything about a man who has died?
Yes. Well, maybe you should. How about that?
Well,
Yeah.
well, I can get the conversation started,
okay,
but
okay.
I'm not letting you off the hook.
Okay.
Which is that in one textual variant,
Right.
And these variants go back to an oral tradition, so it's not that one variant is right and one variant is wrong. But in any case, in one textual variant, the word for had died is apophthimenou,
Right.
which is just died. You can't even tell whether it was a violent death.
Right, exactly.
And then the other variant is apoktamenou, which really has to do with somebody
with murder.
getting
Right.
getting cut up and,
Right.
and dying violently.
Right.
And so you could say that in the version that has come down to us as the dominant version, which is the more neutral,
Right.
man who has died.
Right.
There, the emphasis is really on blaming somebody's death on somebody and not worrying so much about was it an act of violence, was it premeditated? It's just, why did somebody die?
Right, right. I mean, the other aspect of it is that it doesn't specify a blood relative here.
No.
In either case, the way it does in Ajax.
In the Ajax speech.
And I think there it makes you think about philoi, about
friends
and the wider context of the Iliad, which is important, right?
And of course, there are other connections and differences between this little vignette and the master narrative of the Iliad. For instance, I think declaring publicly to the population of the district is important because that's not quite what Agamemnon does in the main text, of course. It's not like he publicly addresses all the hosts of men that he was wrong and Achilles was right. He's not the kind of man to do that.
Right.
Right. But, parallels can be drawn on at different levels, I think.
Unlike what you said, Sasha, about different levels, because I could easily see this kind of poetry play out over many, many years for different audiences in different situations. And I could even see that this kind of narrative about a picture that's on the shield could, in some versions of the narrative, really make you think about Patroclus more than anybody else, where Patroclus could say, in a timeless situation, it's your fault, Agamemnon, and my nearest and dearest friend would not have been killed. And that would be something that would fit the variant where the ancient Greek says somebody who's killed violently.
Right, exactly.
But when it's attenuated and where it's just,
A dead
I
person.
blame X's death on you, Agamemnon.
Right.
Then with the more neutral form,
Right.
you think of Achilles first. Is I wouldn't have to die the way I'm going to die, and my other self wouldn't have had to die
either.
And so how can I ever accept compensation? And in other contexts, I talked about the book and then the film, Civil Action.
Right.
And how in the film there's a voiceover at the beginning which asks the question, what is the price of a human life? Mm-hmm. And all I'm saying here is that if it's a man who had died,
right,
then you really think of Achilles first.
Right, right.
Or you could. I could easily see, let's say, 10 people, if we select 10 people from all the people who are participating in this reading experience, right, to write short response papers, I could see 10 very interesting different interpretations because the medium has gone through so many different stages of what people today call reception, that is to say, how a group reacts to,
right, and
to
all
poetry.
All of them could be validly connected with the context,
In
wider
terms of the
context.
song culture,
Yes, exactly.
Although we could make the argument that in terms of the Iliad and in terms of how the description of the shield is embedded in the Iliad,
right,
that does narrow down our choices, but certainly the tradition
yep,
could take you in many different directions in many different situations.
yeah. I mean, the other thing that comes to my mind anyway, and maybe we should stop, is the shield itself, which is a
Yes.
piece of compensatory thing. It's an immortal thing. That
It's an
Achilles
immortal
gets.
thing to
And
make up for the less valuable thing that
Right.
Achilles lost.
And in a sense, it has the whole world in it, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's kind of giving him a metaphorical representation of the world that's immortal. That's something like the poetry itself.
Yes, yes.
So there are these beautiful.
And there it is, embedded in
it's
the
like
Iliad.
Mise on abyme,
Yes.
right? Where
Yes.
those things are mirroring each other.